Welcome everybody. We're here in the Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community Meeting. I hope you're all doing great. We have a full packed schedule that I believe Ulla has just shared in the chat, so please feel free to download that and take a look. And in the interest of time, let's get started right away. Can you switch the screen? I think we're seeing the presenters mode, Ulla. It's fine, it will work like that.
I was going to say, still seeing the presenters mode.
If you click the third button on top, that should work. Don't know why that's not working.
There we go.
In any case,
Better?
Yep. So before we get to this, which is the second item on the agenda, I just wanted to quickly announce something that happened through emails to several people. Obviously, as you know, we're in a pre-competitive space. We can't announce any commercial events or favor anyone other than, as many of you have done on the landing page, on the homepage, basically your little symbol of your company and or brand. That we can, but that is more of a feature of the collaboration rather than hosting or posting any banners or so. Obviously, we're required to obey to those rules. I just wanted to reiterate it, and that is actually part of the rules of engagement. And I just wanted to reiterate that. The first item is there were a couple of requests. Can we get sort of a quick summary of what PIcc is for use in various, internal or external purposes? So as part of that, there's an executive summary. The slides we can go through very quickly just for additional input and suggestions. So this should be fairly familiar to everyone who knows what this is. There are 10 points that we put together here. So first, Regulatory Science Initiative. MDIC acts as the formal convener. We aim to facilitate innovations in pathology. We advance safety and effectiveness evaluations, or help with that. Then we harmonize approaches to speed up delivery to patients. We do have FDA participation from CDRH and also in particular collaboration in the pre-competitive space. So antitrust monitoring fully applies. As I just mentioned, we're open to all stakeholders, public and private, emphasis on benefit to patients. And membership is free and all materials are available. We could add the word online, but it could also be published, but that's the first slide. If you have any notes, these are just, I think, 8 slides in total. So maybe you can keep those for a bit later. There's a link to the website where all the material is usually found. How we operate is we provide an infrastructure. There are some metrics here. If you can go back one time quickly, Ulla, to the how we operate. Can you go back too? So this is, the infrastructure and platform that we create serves to help all stakeholders come together and move forward individual projects. So we have 9 work groups. Those were topics that we initially identified as meaningful, but that has been supplemented by at least 11 additional projects that either would fall into one of those or are led by individual people or don't really fit into any of these individual work groups. So that's currently the status of how we operate. Then on the next slides, there are metrics. So as of, I think, a week ago, this is the pathway on how we operate. So here are the metrics. 467 members. You see some of the other elements there that we organized. And the current membership is parsed out here in, different colored pieces here. You see the patient advocacy group with a whopping 1%. We hope we can expand. We reached out to several, but I think it's very important to keep in mind that this is sort of, roughly a third industry, and then probably another third academia, and then professional organization regulators, which I think is fantastic to have 18% regulators or government participation in the membership. If you keep going, the platform we create is to support individual projects. Can you go back to the slide that illustrates sort of the concept? Yep. So focus is here not on individual competitive product development, and PIcc as a group does not actively participate, meaning we organize it, we help stakeholders to come together, but you would still have to do the work, and we can help disseminate it or provide input from the various different stakeholders and their respective vantage points. If you go forward then, Ola. These were just some selected examples. I think if you're interested in learning more about this, please feel free to go to the website. And then one last slide in this executive summary, which was requested by MDIC. What is our vision for the immediate or shorter term, midterm future? So I think you can quickly read through those. We are working actively on some MDDT submissions. We want to grow the membership, increase awareness of the importance of regulatory science, publications, and then one thing here that is point 3, increase patient and patient advocacy engagement. I think that's it, right, Ola?
Yep.
Okay, so this is kind of an, can you go back, Ola? So this is the sort of overview of the executive summary slide deck that will be available after this meeting for everyone. Is there any glaring error, things that require rewording or so, just as a sort of feedback from the group? Question? No?
Hi, Joe.
Hey.
Yeah, I was struggling to figure out where to unmute myself. I would think it'd be good to get any key dates onto this. I think we're on the calendar at Path Visions. And if we can decide that in this slide deck.
So key dates adding to. Yep.
Just so something that they can like put in their notebook to try and show up for.
That's a good idea. We can also add the steering committee dates, which is always the third Wednesday in the
We're
month.
rock solid on that now, right?
Yep. No, I think that makes sense. I think it's that would help a lot. And Kingsley put in the chat that there's CRDH instead of CDRH. That's a
good catch.
Very important detail. Other comments?
Whoa, CRDH. Of course, that's not the right letters. CD or H.
Consider it changed. Okay, let's move on. There's an update about a video and a MDIC public forum entitled Artificial Intelligence Powered Cancer Diagnostics and How Regulatory Science Can Reshape Digital Diagnostics. You see the 5 experts that I had the pleasure of serving as a moderator for. And there were sort of certain questions posed. It was quite interesting to hear the different visions and ideas. Ed Magirison, the director of OSIL, was joining. You see Laura Lassiter, Marcus Herman, Matthew Hanna, and Esther Abel. So was an illustrious crowd. And if you go to the next slide, there's a video. I think it's already available either on our website or on MDIC's website. It was kind of like a quick overview of, you know, various components from different angles, and definitely a fun thing. If you haven't seen it yet, please take a look. And I think it was part and parcel of the MDIC annual/public forum. So a lot of interest from the many medical device manufacturers. So I just thought I wanted to provide that as a brief update that A, that happened, and B, maybe you can take a look if that's applicable to your industry or interests. That may be helpful. Next item is an NIH so-called Bridge to AI, Bridge to AI, and there it is. So this is a new funding opportunity, and there is, if you look into the bylaws and the actual specifications of what the grant works for, or what aims for, if you go to the next slide, Ulla, there are some specifications in what the NIH is looking for. Ulla, can you go to the next slide, please? So the components of participating organizations is quite interesting. So you can take a look what is outlined there. There's an OT2 code, which is an other transactions code. I think it's definitely an interesting idea. And as you can see, the research opportunity announcement title already entails data generation projects for the NIH Bridge to AI program. So this is one of the just tiny snippets. There is a more detailed version of this in the chat. I think Ulla just pasted that. So please feel free to take a look. But what I wanted to hear is whether we or some of the people on this call would consider this sort of something that we should do as a collaboration, or some people who are interested in contributing to a data generation for the Bridge to AI project.
Actually, I wanted to bring up something, maybe not necessarily data generation, that's a big part of it, but I know, as you mentioned in the previous slides, a lot of the big goals is regulatory science. And I don't know if anybody had a chance to actually, there's a meeting today about the grand challenges. And in none of the grand challenges, there's actually only two that I saw in pathology. There was one by Cody at University of Kentucky, and brain's not working, the OSU group. They proposed grand challenges, and they're pretty broad. They're pretty nice, big, big moonshot type of initiatives. But I haven't seen anything in regulatory science, in terms of, how do you develop, even if you have these data sets, who has access, how do you build the access, how you validate appropriately, how do you ensure that there's no biases in the data sets that you've actually used to train or test, all these different things. I don't think there was any mention of that. So I thought it was a good opportunity for this group to propose a grand challenge. How do you ensure, because it's actually part of the scope. If you look at, biases, they wanted to make sure that things are ethically done, that biases are mitigated. It's all part of the scope that's in the statement for this initiative. And I thought this is something that particularly this group is particularly positioned for.
Joe, this is Rich, and sorry I joined late. I was thinking the same thing. I've had this open on my desktop for a couple of days now. And the problem is getting the data. But one thing we could do is if we could do something like a call for data for all ECC data, for example, cancer pathology. I mean, that would be really huge if we could somehow aggregate that in its original standard format. And for AI purposes, that would be pretty powerful. But achieving that, data donations. So it's more of an implementation, but it's not a technical problem per se. It's more of a social engineering problem, like most of these things. How do you get enough people to participate to get a really good data set?
Right now, I think the grand challenges are just proposals. Like, if we were to fund something, what would the theme of what they're trying to challenge, so they were actually soliciting these challenges out there, which would provide kind of the points, the moonshots that we want to aim for. So this is a good time for us to put one out there, not only in data sets generation. That's the reason why I forwarded it to everybody at PERT as well, because I think synoptic data, curating EMR data and different IS data is also part of it. And I think also as part of PERT, this is particularly very well where we're positioned in the call here. So that's another opportunity. But particularly for the PIcc, in terms of regulatory science, I don't think anybody mentioned about how to do things ethically, to look at, how to go about things. One of the big things that came up in the call today was that if you're going to share stuff, I didn't realize this, but there's actually state, just like in China, where there's firewalls where you can't really send stuff out, particularly with tissues. Texas, I didn't realize this, was actually pretty tough in terms of sharing any type of EMR data, outside the state. And so you ended up doing, one of the big conversations was whether we should make, if we're going to share WSI data, for instance, should it be centralized or decentralized? If you're going to put a model, are you going to distribute it locally so that it goes to the local stations where they don't go centralized? Or are you going to centralize everything? Well, if you have a state law that keeps you from doing it, well, that ends up being a problem. You can't really create a centralized infrastructure to be able to.
Point 6 on the agenda today will deal with the individual state laws and how that is, on the one hand, trying to realize what is not being accomplished by HIPAA, while on the other hand, people are looking for solutions now. And, if we propose something like that, and, it's going to be more and more complicated. But I think the part on this initial part, the OT2, I think it encompasses what both of you have mentioned. It would still, however, require, even if it's a challenge, or if it's, let's say, as a regulatory science challenge, at least collection, or at least a plan to centralize some sort of data, or at least have a data set and then have multiple people look at it too. Or what were you thinking when you set sort of a challenge?
Well, I think I wish I could share it, because I think you have to, maybe I can. Let me give you an example. Let me see if I can share my screen. Oh, can you give me participation? Disabled. I'll give you an example. If anybody signed up, they would be able to see some of this is an example of the challenges you put up here. I was also going to ask this as well. I don't know if this ties in with this Biden administration launch. This is the site. Let me go. So let's just look at some of the challenges that are there. And so let me just put down Cody's. So this is his. And so you can actually propose a challenge. There's a deadline. I don't exactly know when Cody is supposed to send it, but this is just something, for example, that gives you an idea of what you could put out there. And so on this particular call today, we just had people invite and discuss what you were thinking, how will you go about it? This is Cody's. There's another one from the OSU group, which I can also pull up. But I thought about, why don't we submit some more? I was going to actually try to engage the API community, but CAP can do this as well. Get more people involved in this in terms of regulatory science, the part about state laws, what are the state laws that are inhibiting us from being able to do anything? Nobody really knows. I mean, I think that's actually a great opportunity to study that. That's another, so the proposals of what to look into to help enable innovations in AI and stuff, all the different hurdles, gaps, all these things can be studied. And I think putting these challenges out there sort of frames the funding opportunities that are out there. That's why I'm encouraging people to, I didn't write this, Cody did, and it's pretty good. Let me just show you the OSU group ones. Let me see, because I was also on that call today.
I just want to comment really quickly that if you're a big company with lots of money, there don't seem to be any state barriers to getting de-identified data from pretty much anywhere.
And that's very interesting. I guess you need a big
you look at, yeah, I think a lot of those state barriers are related to public health initiatives, which is really kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah, so public health, they frown upon it. Private, great, doesn't matter what. That's a weird dystopian future, or future present, that we're living in. But this is an example of the OSU group. So that's what I'm saying, I haven't submitted one, but this might be something to really just put out there. These are just ones that were cherry picked for the town hall today. And so,
I really like the idea of, a regulatory sciences part with the privacy. Ulla, can you just jump to the next item?
Let me just stop sharing. Like I said, they had other things, town hall, other things you can also look at the recording, just to provide you kind of a good flavor of what this is all about. But I think this is a good opportunity for us in this community just to get involved.
So I don't know if you've seen this. This is a commentary on exactly the topic, Joe, that you had just mentioned about the privacy and many different states. We had shared in a previous version a state law. Let me just share the link as well. Or Ulla, if you just have it, if you can paste it, because this is kind of a trend. Many different states have already moved to implementation of or proposal of different privacy laws because of a lack of compatibility with GDPR, as well as different privacy and consumer laws depending on where. Here's the link to this tracker. If you scroll down on that web page, you will see a detailed explanation. So the Texas law, for example, which is, I think it was in committee and it may be approved now, is actually HB 3741. So that is definitely in the, more bluer range on that heat map. But I encourage you to take a look. So I just thought I'd share this. If you want to take a look at the map, that would definitely apply to what Joe had just outlined. So while there was a separate topic on the agenda today, I think it naturally just evolved into possibly a link to this Bridge to AI call.
Yeah, so, we barely touched upon this, but I think probably because the group was, they're mostly computational people. So they don't like to think about the barriers. They like to think about what's, once you have the data, what to do with it. But the barriers are very important. This is a big one. Is there any talk on a national level or trying to unify the states in terms of this? Because I assume if a state does something, technically, if there's a violation, they can go to the Supreme Court, and then that could be a very seminal case, for this. But I just don't know if that's something that can be actually done on a national level, something like this, or is this really a state's right?
So I know, let me just paste the link. So HHS has proposed on December 10th, here's the link in the chat, large ranging modifications of the HIPAA privacy rule. But that is, obviously a gigantic legal endeavor. So I think the notice of proposed rulemaking that I just pasted is a very controversial one, and you can look into that. Whether that still applies or not, I don't know. But I think the privacy, let's call it perception at the various state levels, also differs and is used differently from a policy and political perspective. So many states have opted to move forward independently. And there are several examples for that. For example, the California has two different, one is a consumer privacy law, the other one is a California Privacy Right Act. So one is known as Proposition 24, and both of those have been passed. I think Virginia is the next state that has a Consumer Data Protection Act. And whether those individual acts can ultimately be unified to something like the GDPR in Europe remains to be determined. I think at the highest level, people are discussing that. But as far as I know from discussions and from some newspaper articles, I don't have any better evidence. It's also anticipated, let's see how this goes. But we get into consumer rights rather than in medical, data sharing, etc.
So let me just put two things that talked about this initiative too. I thought they were good ideas. I don't have the legal background to understand it. So some workarounds. What if you could de-identify the data to a certain extent, to the acceptable degree? Does this bypass this state, whether they have a law or not? Will that bypass anything? Or is that something that has to be sent through the courts?
So the fundamental difference is not whether it's anonymized or primary anonymous or not. The fundamental right here is, do you as a patient have to give people right to access your data or not? Meaning, can you, and that this is like a fundamental discussion that we probably won't be able to resolve, but can I say I do not want my data to be used in any research, and do I have a right to do that? Not whether I want this, but whether should we give patients that option or not. And there's a right of deletion, a right of restriction, a right of recertification, a right of change of your own opinion about this, and a right of access. And, you know, when you click accept all cookies, that is one of the very, very many ramifications that you have to, you know, consent to certain components. And that's a huge discussion, who owns the data and whether someone can opt in and opt out. And that's I don't know whether anyone has a solution for that, but those are some of the issues that play into that.
That's why I think putting the grand challenge out there and talking about, because no one's talking about it. Nobody brought that up. I didn't know about it. It's good.
The problem is it's fundamentally a legislative challenge, not so much a research challenge.
Maybe, but it requires technical knowledge. And if you leave it up to legislators, you know, that's like the blind leading the blind. You should inform them. These are the positives, negatives, and that there needs to be some informed opinion about that. Otherwise, you're leaving it up to legislators.
Well, these states may be operating, there may be like a private coalition of, you know, privacy advocates that have like a straw man document that they give to various, you know, representatives in the states, and they all like riff off of that document. And we need to know about that kind of thing. But like in the cancer registry world, cancer reporting, there's a similar problem. Every state has its own requirements for cancer reporting, and we try to get them to adopt, you know, to the national NACER standard, but they do or they don't according to, you know, what they have time to listen to. For example, reporting in situs or skin cancers or whatever, you know, those are like very hit or miss in various states. And, you know, the ability to do that requires, you know, it does require like a national organization where every state has representatives that have, you know, have connections to the legislature, an advocacy group or groups. It is a grand challenge. I have to say, I just don't know how, you know, given the structure of the political system in the United States, you know, how possible it is to achieve success there.
I think
go ahead.
I mean, that's the thing. The challenge is to make it apolitical. Once you make it political, it becomes polarizing. But if you bring out the advantages of having it while also addressing the concerns by privacy groups and making it apolitical, that's really the only way you can navigate something like this, because it holds you back. I mean, everybody agrees it holds you back.
In a way, this in part drifts into a health policy discussion, but what I think is a regulatory science question is, what are the business obligations for, let's say, a company, right? Because risk assessments of owning or not owning data is very, very, I don't know, that can be assessed from a scientific perspective.
Yeah, I haven't seen, I just read, you know, just before coming to this meeting, I read another article, I think it was in something on my iPhone feed on this exact topic. And they go through about all the potential dangers to patients without ever actually delineating what those potential dangers are. And I assume they're related to re-identification and faulty de-identification algorithms of some sort. But, you know, even if they do re-identify you, you know, that, I guess that entire area needs to be examined with some kind of research, like looking at data sets and just looking at how likely it is to re-identify somebody that you could do something about it. I haven't seen really much written there at all.
I think that's what Joe's indirectly proposing. The problem is at the GDPR level in the European Union, that has been done, not in a scientific sense, but at some point it just becomes a business obligation that you just have to And the question is whether it's protecting anyone from real harm or whether it's just perceived harm. And I think given that in the US, these, like, let's say a central legislative process has not been initiated, gives us the opportunity to create data for, you know, providing at least a rational component or hard data to that decision-making process. But that's obviously a gigantic regulatory science challenge. So I like the idea a lot. Would there
out there for you?
There are things that can be done on a central level. This is also hard. For example, if you get some U.S., you know, federal level public health agency, whether it's the NCI or the CDC or whoever, to establish a public health registry with mandated reporting, and if you don't do it, your Medicare funding gets cut or something like, or Medicaid funding gets cut. So that's generally the threat that they use to do like mandated cancer reporting, is everybody knows that you don't want to get on the bad side of the payers. But if there was a national program that was somehow linked for collecting the data, it might provide a way forward Otherwise, working through 50 different state legislatures might be, it's just such a huge task. Anyway,
I mean,
just
you
throwing
mentioned,
that out there.
Richard, you mentioned the SEER database, right? I don't know exactly how many states there are. I think 16, right? And that is a rather, I don't know.
Well,
it's not
CDC is all 50 states and territories. So, they have public reporting requirements from every single state. And for the most part, there's one or two states that are not very good at it. But for the most part, they do get national level cancer reporting for all 50 states. SEER is a subset. It's about half of the cancer population of the U.S. But either way, they do have mandated reporting, and there's not just a stick, there's also a carrot. They get funding to run those state cancer registries.
Anyway, I would just propose this out there. Regulatory sense can also talk about the barriers. We can talk about the issues with the state legislatures, but how to create incentive models, economic models to actually encourage people to either join in or create disincentives. These are things that I don't think anybody else is talking about.
Oh, and I think we had these two topics on screen today to mention. If you go back, Ulla, to this New England Journal article, I don't know if you guys have a quick moment to open that. And I think it's almost at the end of the article where they say that the lack of this, let's call while privacy law is sort of, I'm paraphrasing here, is evolving. This gives us the option to implement real meaningful things right now, so that we can come up with, exercising meaningful control over our privacy data to demonstrate that it works, which is, a positive way of spinning this absence of, the ultimate solution, which we can definitely use. And, we could also reach out to the authors who came up with sort of this approach. This is from UPenn. And, definitely a topic that is of great importance, not only for, digital pathology. What do others think? This be a topic of interest for others?
Well, I mean, this is going to be a tangent. I don't want to divert from our conversation, but I think on Friday, I think Cap today is interviewing me because I think on the listserv we were talking about national patient identifiers, and I was making the argument that I'm trying to incorporate human factors into this. Maybe using an identifier might be problematic because you're tying the identifier in many databases to things that can penalize you, like your comorbidities and other things if you want to get life insurance. What I was trying to propose is that it's not necessarily the identifier. What we should be working on is identification mechanisms. And, and I was actually thinking of not necessarily a national patient identifier, but a broker system, kind of a national honest broker system that goes through tokens. So you can actually identify that the patient that you have is the patient identified. And through these secure mechanisms, you can actually verify through that mechanism. Then the identifier is actually in the secure database, it's there. But in that database, there's nothing else to tie bad things like comorbidities. Like if you have Huntington's disease, it's not going to be linked to anything. That's in the siloed local database. So, it's kind of a viewpoint, but it's a very new way to think of how to identify patients, so that if you have HIEs and other things, we spend a lot of money trying to re-identify somebody when they go from one network to another. A lot of wasted money. And I'm not saying that a national patient identifier is the answer, but we should have some type of identification infrastructure in place. And that's the argument I'm trying to make. And so this sort of ties into that. We talk about de-identification and such, but
John, I think this is a very important point. So the whole conversation about de-identification is extremely relevant for research. We've just recently seen that with the TCGA, which was taken down of TCGA because of PHI leak, which was discovered now several years later and is probably propagated through various systems. So definitely important. Difficult to address, I think, especially if you decentralize it, like who will be responsible for making sure there's actually no PHI in there and so forth. But what you've just brought up, I think, is equally important, like what data do we actually want to have in there too? And I think especially from a regulatory science perspective and a patient safety perspective, at the moment, a lot of the data in digital pathology doesn't have any identifiers in there. Like the SVS files, like often, they have some identifiers that should be removed, but they lack other crucial identifiers that should probably be in there. And that is also something I think we as a group should probably be thinking about not only what data to remove for research, but what data to actually include for research, but potentially also for clinical use.
Yeah, I brought that up with the group today. So both the two groups have brought up the challenges. We should talk about de-identification as a science as well. Like,
Well, we had a proposal in the cancer registry system a while back for not a patient identifier, because that was still like illegal for federal employees to talk about, although that's changed recently. But more of a specimen identifier where you get like a UID, and that would go into some national registry with a link to where the source of that UID is, and if you were allowed to, you could figure out who the patient was. If you're not allowed to, you can use that UID to join up the specimens as with other specimens in some way. So that would be more of a national specimen registry, which is very similar, Joe, to what you were just talking about. As part of that, we can make a common data set, of what, for various types of specimens, what is the minimal data set, non-identifying data set, but yet still identifies the specimen, that it could be linked up in some mechanism without de-identifying the patient to other information from the same patient. So anyway, those kinds of conversations are taking place all over the place. It's only been recently that the Congress has allowed federal, there was a ban on federal employees spending any of their time or, hours even discussing a national patient identifier. But that has apparently gone away now. So this really is the time, I think, to bring up these issues again.
I think it didn't pass the Senate. It went through the House, but I don't think it passed through the Senate. So it's still not great. I think that's my understanding of it. So
You might be right. You might be right.
So it's still
Right.
yeah,
I love the discussion, but I think we have to be mindful of time. Ulla, we're gonna just schedule a call and then we send this out to the whole group, because this is a very important topic, and then we see who registers and shows up, and then we guide this based on the points that were made here. Let's move forward to the working group updates. I think the first one is from the payer group. I think Laura and Esther. I'm not sure who will take this on.
This is Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Hey. Yeah, so the payer group, I think the last time we met, I updated everyone that we had spoken with the AMA rep about digital pathology and had a good conversation. Their recommendation was to reach out to some of the trade organizations or to start developing some consensus, and they recommended a few groups that we should speak to. The last payer working group call that we had, we did a little strategizing on next steps and how we wanted to move forward. And the decision was that we'd like to first reach out to the radiology groups to get basically do some background research, find out what their approach was, what worked and what didn't, and then sort of create a strategy for ourselves. And then once we've done that, start reaching out to some of the other groups like CAP and the pathology groups to start to basically build a coalition and agree on a strategy that we can take to the AMA. So right now we're trying to make establish contact with the radiology teams and get a phone call with them, and then we'll move forward from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is obviously one of the final stages of integration, but ever more so important. Next up is data standardization. I think we have two updates, one from Marcus and one from Kingsley. Marcus, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think our update ties very well into the conversation that we just had about data sharing and use of data for AI. So as part of the diacon working group 26, we have worked over the last couple of weeks on what we call a diacon hackathon. I think we've mentioned it on a previous call. For that purpose, we have used data sets that previously existed and that were used as part of these diacon connectathons that occurred over the last couple of years. But we've also now acquired new data sets where we got slides donated kindly by an organization and scanned them by different vendors, now outputting them immediately in diacon format, and made them available through a variety of archives where people can now work with them, create annotations, analyze them and so forth, and feed the results in diacon format back into these systems. That's something we've presented last week at the European Congress for Digital Pathology, which occurred virtually. But we've decided that we're going to continue that exercise over the next couple of months, and we'll probably have, I mean, fingers crossed, an in-person event at Pathology Visions in October. So if anyone is interested in participating in that, feel free to reach out or join our working group calls on the DICOM side, where a lot of the people from the Alliance are also heavily involved.
Marcus, if you could share that, that's great progress. If you could share the dates with Ulla, she can put that on the calendar. And for those who are interested, you know, they can find, that would be awesome.
Dates of what, of the conference, or?
Yeah, the conference, and, you know, possibly hackathons, you know, if that's part of the conference. I presume it's one day, or it may
It's
not
one
be
day.
the whole
We
conference.
don't have the exact data on what day of the conference it's going to occur. We're still trying to finalize that program, but I can provide that to Ulla as soon as that's determined.
Hey, Marcus,
Awesome.
I was going to ask, I'm going to put this out because API was we had digested something for API and wanted the community to contribute. You have to do this individually, not as an organization, but the work that you're doing sort of ties in with this. And I didn't know if you wanted to make a comment about, you know, if you create interoperability for images, what would you like to see? So the thing I put in the chat was basically the ONC's request. If I had interoperability, I can XYZ. So I thought you, for the imaging and stuff, the work that you've done could certainly cognify that. So I'm just putting that out there for you, because I think you're probably the best person I know positioned to do that for imaging.
We can also put this on our update. So I coordinate with Ulla that other people can comment as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's great. No,
Yeah,
it would be.
Digest some stuff. I'm having Noah Hoffman and my interoperability subcommittee sort of work on this. We digested some of the comments from the listserv, and I'm going to look over it, but we didn't have much on imaging. And so that's the reason why I would love to have, you know, some imaging expertise in terms of just providing them comments, so we can flood them with a bunch of
Yeah,
images.
thanks for pointing that out, Trey.
Kingsley?
Yes, so an update from the data standardization / coding group. So far, we've done a lot of brainstorming and created a path for us to work on. I just want to clarify that what this our project is not about. It's not about reporting standards. We're not trying to remake the CAP protocol or ICCR standard data sets, or we are not also trying to create a new nomenclature like SNOMED or MEDRA, but we're trying to harmonize, create a harmonized framework for pathology data retrieval and standardized formatting for the purpose of research and innovation. We want to provide the pathology researcher with tools that they can create standard pathology data sets that are FDA submission ready and analysis ready. A similar initiative has been from our research. A similar initiative has been done in the clinical research side. There's a project that the FDA is part of called the One Source Data Project. It's a collaboration between the FDA, UCSF, and Quantum Leap Healthcare Collaborative, where they were able to create standard data sets from the EMR. These data sets will be used for submission. They can be submitted directly to the FDA. So the FDA is also interested in having a one source data format for clinical trials and data submission. So I think this project is very important from that standpoint. We have an action plan, and the action plan is this. We want to have a three-phase implementation plan. Phase one will be to create standardized formats for pathology data elements. And then we'll use this, the Consortium for Data Interchange, a standard operational data model. This is an operational data model that is more commonly used in clinical trials. And during this phase, we're going to create annotated documents showing data elements with different variable names and field names. And then we're going to create a programming from these data elements to convert these annotations into standard data sets. And we use dummy data to show, have a use case. The use case is going to be a prostate cancer pathology reporting for using prostate cancer. We have a few challenges at this point.
Kingsley,
yes.
Sorry, I have to cut this off. If you could provide the update, because there's like 6 more points. I know that that you put a lot of time in it, but I would want to give the other work groups also a chance. If we have some time in the end, I would come back to you. I apologize, but I hope that will work.
Okay.
ML AI work group, Steve, do you want to provide a brief update?
Yes, sure. So we met again, and on our last meeting, we discussed the results that we got back from the teaching group, where we basically got a list of 40 or so different use cases. We then took those use cases and boiled them down into a clinical area, being decision support or prognostics or quantification, that sort of thing. And then we actually translated that into the computer language that we're trying to accomplish in the AI objective for classification, localization, segmentation, et cetera. We've almost gotten all the way through that at least once. We'll have to digest it again, but the idea is that once we're able to translate through those use cases, we'll start to do our mapping out of our rubrics and our decision trees to see what sort of commonality we can use to harmonize all of this divergent information.
Awesome, thank you, Steve. Pre-analytics update. Ulla, can you share the one slide? I wanted to point to a very interesting paper. This will only take 1 minute. It's from a group from the Netherlands, and as part of their augmentation, an automated data augmentation program that's published here. In figure 1, they showed a very interesting sort of snapshot overview of stain variation across different institutions, abbreviated there with these strange letter codes. I just thought that in case you need that for a slide or just to illustrate this point, which I think a lot of us have stated, but I saw this depiction and I just wanted to share it. This is like I think a very good example of sort of pre-analytical variability that they took into account. So I defer to this paper and it will be in the update. Next work group update is coming from the trainees group. Sarah?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say quickly that we're posting on our Twitter page relatively actively. I'm going to throw a link to our Twitter page in the chat. Or Julia, if you can help with that, that'd be great. But we're posting on there specifically things that can benefit trainees. So things like path visions abstracts that trainees can submit, joining the hackathon, creating a team. There's another post on there about postdoc mentor nominations, in which postdocs can win like $1,000, which is super great. So anything that you have that's trainee specific, if you have a link to it and some language that you want us to post, that would be super beneficial. Please send it on over to Julia and myself. Finally, we have a few new events in the pipeline. We're kind of running on trainee specific schedule, so taking some time off in the summer months here, but getting things together for the fall. And spring semesters kind of in line with the school year. So if you have any additional ideas for that type of programming, again, contact Julia and myself. And if you have any trainees that are joining you this fall, definitely please think of us and send them our way. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Great update, and thank you for being so active on the trainees front. A few more updates, and then hopefully we can come back to Kingsley. One is Ulla has completely revamped the website, should work much more smoothly across multiple platforms, of which you see here evidence. You see also that the total number of hits since the switch is still growing. We have, 4,400 hits in the portrayed time frame here since March 1. There's a lot of activity, a lot of primary hits not linked from any other pages, which is great. Probably explains some of the commercial interest in portraying some of the products on our page. But I just wanted to throw this out there that we're having quite good web traffic, which is probably related to the amazing content that all of you have contributed to and are contributing to. So big high five to everyone, and I think we can hopefully expand that even further. Next slide, Ulla, is sort of a quick shout out to CAP. So I'm sure you've all seen the updated paper for whole slide image validation. I know some of the people on this call have actually been co-authors. We're putting this, in the chat as well. I just wanted to give a shout out the CIP page on validating whole slide imaging for diagnostic purposes. So that's a very specific use case. In this case, clinical is excellent. There's an amazing slide deck from Anil Pawani, and I just wanted to briefly mention this in case you haven't seen it. There's an overview slide deck, an update, tons of links, very, very helpful website. And I just wanted to mention this again. Next topic is the proposal for a New England Journal of Medicine Catalyst data gathering event. Oh, look, can you move forward? So in communication and looking through the material, if you want to quickly read over this, you will see that there are several options of submitting this. So the time frame would be December. And the components that are requested for it could be articles, it could be reports, or if you see bullet point 3 on the right side is a possible virtual event held in conjunction with the issue. And there are some examples here that I would invite you to participate or read and then continue thinking about it. We will schedule a separate meeting about a virtual event related to this issue, and it should be focused on a data gathering event, because that would then illustrate what the challenges are, practically speaking, with AI, which is related to ground truth and establishing the basic data set. Questions about this or suggestions or other points here? Okay, then the last two items on the agenda. One is we had proposed to discuss at this meeting whether we should have an in-person meeting, either in conjunction with the DPA meeting in October or before or after, having it in person or having it virtual, and or having a separate meeting. We could also discuss that. That's why the two topics are kind of back to back. Whether we should have the New England Journal of Medicine virtual event as an actual in-person event for us, where we would do true data gathering or scoring, but also provide kind of a hybrid solution where people could join online and witness some of that. So I just wanted to throw this out there because generally speaking, we always had a meeting near DPA Visions meeting. I mean, yeah, what do people think?
Just to get the ball rolling, Joe, FDA is not allowing any travel yet. So
what if you were?
What if I was what?
Allowed to travel?
Well, that's where I've already got it penciled in on my requests, but yeah. They're not making any decisions on any requests because there's no travel allowed.
Doubly so for NCI fellows. I've been told I can't travel at all through 2021.
What about
Yale
other
is
folks?
allowing travel in the fall, starting August, like end of August.
for those who are able to travel, and I think if there could be something arranged at the DPA and offer some live streaming substitute as a hybrid, maybe that could work.
I mean, don't you think the future of meetings is hybrid after we've been through the pandemic? We may never go back to full in-person meetings with no virtual feed.
Well, the issue is mostly, should we supplement an online meeting with an in-person meeting and thereby go hybrid, or should we just say we can just keep it, Zoom for now? I'm just mostly looking for, is there value in considering an in-person meeting if we could couple it with some, let's say, practical deliverable? Because, from a meeting perspective, I mean, we can discuss whether we want some speakers, but I think the question here regarding regulatory science, I think the most value we can add is by delivering practical solutions. So I thought, for example, the meeting in LA was phenomenal because we had an actual data gathering event coupled, hosted and organized by the FDA, which I think sent a very strong message to the pathology community. And, the pathologists walking by had, firsthand interaction with, FDA folks. That is something that I haven't heard before. And I think that's extremely valuable. Problem is we could obviously learn on how to make that even more so that we get more data and more value out of it. But just, I mean, the raising awareness of regulatory science is part and parcel of what we do. So I think that can be easier accomplished in person just by chatting, by, sort of curbside chats rather than Zoom meetings. But I just wanted to throw this out here. So I see 2 comments in the chat that there is value in an in-person meeting. So Ulla, maybe it's time for a poll so that people can say yes or no, or I don't care. All right, Kingsley, do you want to tell us briefly about your challenges? Because I think I cut you off and I really wanted to hear that because that's important too, but just trying to navigate getting through the agenda.
Okay, so thank you, Joe. I know we are out of time, but our main challenge is on getting members to join the committee. That's the first challenge. We need thinking heads. You don't have to be a data expert. We just need you to be a good critic of what we propose or what we are doing, and then that will be great for us to have. So if you're interested, you can always reach out to Esther or myself and to join the committee. And second challenge is on the access we have to an LIS database. We need to have a use case and present that use case as an example of what we want to do. So that's the second challenge. We'll try to navigate that in the coming months, but let's see how that goes.
Thank you, Kingsley. Samantha, I see you raised your hand.
Did, and I was having trouble unmuting for some reason. Yeah, Kingsley, thank you. I was wondering, I was just kind of thinking when you were talking, do you think it would be useful? I know we have a meeting set up to follow up on that smaller group meeting that we had between NCI and SNOMED and CAP and you and Esther.
Yes.
Around the work we're doing in that area. And then we have a follow-up meeting scheduled where you're going to be giving a demo, I think, right? Of
yes.
Kind of the work you've done. Would it be useful to expand that meeting to more folks who, if you're saying you're having trouble kind of getting people engaged, it might be useful if more people could see that. I don't necessarily see a reason that we couldn't have more people on that call.
That would be awesome.
Just an idea. I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I think the more the merrier. I think the more people know about this, the better for us, and the better for the project itself. So yes, would
feel free to forward that then. I think then to whomever that would need to be forwarded to.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Kingsley, I really liked your statement. You don't have to be a data expert. It's okay if you're a very harsh critic. I love that. I think I gonna let that echo as the final statement for today. And thank you very much for joining again. And we get the website update running as fast as we can. And great seeing you, and hope to see you soon.